everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Really appreciate your taking the time to be on the call. We do welcome questions, so please use the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen, and we'll get to those questions at the end of the presentation. We are waiting for Tony Robbins to join us, and he will as soon as possible. Until that time, let's kick this off with Stephen Saltstein, CEO of Force Family Office. Stephen.
Thank you, Harvey. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. We're sorry about the delay, but we greatly appreciate you taking time out of your schedule to be with us. While we're waiting for Tony, the good news is we literally have the godfather of data integrity on with us, Pat Condo, who's the CEO of Seekr. And just to give you a sense, I mean, Pat has had 6 startups. He's taken 2 companies public on the NASDAQ. He sold companies to Microsoft, to Intel, to Lockheed Martin. And there's probably no greater authority on data integrity than Pat. So first of all, Pat, CEO of Seekr, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate you being here.
Thank you. No, my pleasure.
And Pat, I was about to ask, and I think it's fitting. You were talking about data integrity before anyone even knew the initials AI. And I'm just, can you just give us a sense of your background, some of the companies that you've built, and what you were doing with data integrity even before GPT and AI really existed?
No, sure. I started my career about 40 years ago, and I began at Northrop Grumman, where I was building navigation systems for space and missile platforms, and then went on to do the same thing for the space shuttle under Harris Semiconductor. And in both cases, of course, the data was incredibly important. You miss something by 0.00000, et cetera, percentage, and you're off target. So building navigation and guidance systems always taught me to know the quality of the data and how that data is going to be transformed and to what end. Like, where are we trying to put this missile? Where are we trying to put the space shuttle? So I sort of started my career at that level, and then I went on to a company called Digital Equipment Corporation, which was one of the early movers in building.
That was the ghost in the machine, right?
Yeah, all of that, right? So I was very much involved in, had the opportunity to work in everything from engineering to sales to marketing to strategy to business development, and was able to kind of put a holistic view together of what it takes to put something at that scale, a large computing company together. And I was hired then by Allen and Company, a prestigious bank in New York, in the mid-90s to take an investment that they had, a small investment, in a company that was doing something called pattern recognition. And what I quickly discovered was that pattern recognition really is the sort of the basis of how search gets done. And in the 90s, I built a search company called Seekr Technologies. It was a public on NASDAQ, and we took it from about $8 a share to $75 a share, and we sold it to Intel for $1.2 billion. And one of the lessons I learned there was that Intel bought it for the technology. Even though we had 100 million in revenues, they bought it for the technology. And so then the second business I went into right after that, right post 9/11, Allen and Company and myself and Intel raised a little over 300 million and built a company called Convera that became the largest supplier of search technology for the defense and intelligence business. And we built all sorts of things that, again, relied on the quality of data. When you're in the intelligence business, especially in targeting and tracking, verification of that information before you take any action is critical. So again,
and is that really when you got onto the theme of data integrity?
That's it. Yeah. Well, data integrity at the level, the mass level that was coming in, because if you recall, there's something called the Open Source Center that we were principal building. It contains it is the largest repository of real-time information in the world. It's taking it from space, it's taking it from everything terrestrial, undersea, you name it, and it's just merging it all together. And then there are thousands, tens of thousands of analysts that try to sift through that data to solve a particular problem. And so the integrity of that data is incredibly important because data gets transformed. When it comes from these different sources, it can pick up all sorts of things. It can pick up viruses, it can pick up bots, it can pick up, intentional poisonings. And so when it gets to you, you've got to be able to trace your way backwards and say, is this really the information, or has this been modified or transformed? Because you're going to take some action, and that action could be catastrophic to somebody on the other side. So all through this, we learned about the quality of information, And the last thing I would say is, because I've been building search technology all through this period, we all know what happens when you put something in as a query and you get a bad result. You could walk away from that system. That's how frustrated you get. So again, the only thing that gives a good result is the quality of the data going in. And that's why, we focus on, first, let's get the quality. Then let's understand where it's traveled and what transformations it may have had. And then finally, what is the intent behind it?
Great. So we are honored to have the great Tony Robbins with us.
Oh,
Tony,
great.
thanks for joining us. Really glad that you could be here. As most of you know, Tony is a global entrepreneur and investor, #1 New York Times bestselling author, philanthropist, sports team owner, and the world's #1 life and business strategist. So Tony, it's actually great timing. We've had a really nice intro to Seekr. Let me ask you a question, which is, what excites you about Seekr?
Good afternoon, everybody. And Pat, great to see you.
Yeah.
I'm a raving fan. I'll tell you what, I think we need to all recognize that right now what's happening in artificial intelligence is happening so rapidly, and the impact is going to be so intense if we don't tap into tools like this. This isn't just another tech story. It's really about the fundamental fabric of truth in our society. And that's why I put my money where my mouth is with Seekr. I mean, this is a $10 trillion problem. And 5 years ago, before ChatGPT and before the AI explosion, Seekr was already building these solutions to a problem most people didn't even see was coming. And that's, Pat, what I really respect about you. All things you've done in the past are wonderful, but the level of foresight here was amazing. And they were the first to create an AI that automatically identifies biased information and misleading news and the ideologies that I think threaten our democratic values. So today, I think their mission is perfectly aligned with America's AI action plan. It isn't just coincidence they did this, it's really foresight. And when I look at investment, I'm looking at the quality of the leadership's thinking. And I don't know about you guys, but what keeps me up at night is every single day I know there's AI systems that are being trained on garbage, biased, false, and manipulated information. And
I feel like I battle it every day. Really?
I know, and
Yeah.
I think we all do. And what happens when you feed an AI garbage? It doesn't just repeat the garbage; it weaponizes it.
Right.
It creates hallucinations, which we all know is Silicon Valley's fancy word for lies, right? So when your AI makes up people who don't exist or events that never happened, that's not a glitch. That's a threat to our financial markets, to our national security, even to our democracy itself. So I think what's the Seekr advantage is really that what's exciting about it to me is they've analyzed billions of pieces of information artifacts, and they've built technology that doesn't just process that information, it verifies it. They're not playing in some consumer sandbox where the wrong movie recommendation is like the worst outcome. No, they're protecting our financial systems from manipulation, our defense structure, infrastructure really from adversaries, our intelligence agencies from deception. So I think this is mission critical, bet your country on it kind of technology. When a defense system makes a decision or when a bank processes $1 trillion transaction, there's zero room for hallucinations. So I know all of you, I'm sure, are familiar with Warren Buffett's test. His basic investment test is, does he really understand the business? So I look at this business on how you look at it, but I think it's crystal clear. Seekr does one thing brilliantly. It makes AI tell the truth. And how important is that? Every output can be traced back to its source. It's like having a receipt for every thought the AI ever produces. There's no made up facts. There's no phantom people. There's no fabricated events, just the truth verified and validated. And to me, this changes everything, because in finance, we measure risk in points, as we all know. In defense, it's lives. In democracy, it's freedoms. And Seekr is kind of an insurance policy for all three. In fact, they've already deployed where failure isn't an option: in government, in critical infrastructure, defense, and intelligence. Why? Because the cost of failure there is catastrophic. You can't afford anything less than absolute accuracy. So, look, we're at a multi-trillion-dollar moment, and one of the big questions everybody's asking, I'm sure people ask you, they ask me all the time, is will AI eclipse human intelligence? And I think that's the wrong question. The real question is, will we build AI that amplifies human wisdom or amplifies human stupidity? I mean, Seekr has answered that question. They're not just building a faster AI, they're building a trustworthy AI. So the bottom line, the reason why I'm not just an investor, as you can tell, I'm a passionate believer. It's because when you find a company that's solving a problem this fundamental with technology this proven at a moment this critical, I don't hesitate. And I don't think anybody listening should either if you see what I see. I mean, remember, the explosion of unreliable AI isn't coming. It's already here. But so is the solution. And I think Seekr ensures that as AI scales, truth scales with it. And I think it isn't just, I don't know, it's not just an investment opportunity to me. This is about ensuring that AI serves humanity with accuracy and with integrity and with absolute accountability. The time for half measures is over at this point. I mean, things are going too fast. Seekr's here, the solution's now, and the only question is, are you going to be part of the solution? Because I think when it comes to what this is really about, it's protecting the truth. And that isn't just good business. I think that's the business of preserving civilization itself. I'm sorry to sound so dramatic, but I think anybody that understands what's happening with AI understands how critical this mission is. So that's my 2 cents.
Listen, I couldn't agree with you more. And Pat, what I find interesting is, you're protecting data for the U.S. government. You're protecting data for Fortune 1000 companies. Honestly, what I wish is that you could protect the data, and hopefully that's next, for the general populace. Because as Tony's talking about, this misinformation is, it's a terrible cancer on our democracy. I mean, I don't mean to get into that too much, but I really wish you could apply your systems and your successes to people's everyday viewing.
So we have thought about what the best way to do that would be, and the Chat GPT and OpenAI and Gemini and Google and AWS and Anthropic have all spent a fortune on trying to get into the public and provide, I think, some magic to them, where for the first time they could communicate with the machine, and they could accept things that might be a bit erroneous, because the risk is only to the person. It's not really to the business, or it's not to the to the mission of a defense and intelligence business. But as time has gone on, they've realized that they need to move these models really over to business and over to government. And, they've also realized that their shortcomings, which are these hallucinations, are going to prevent them from deploying effectively in these kind of organizations. And so we saw that sort of coming, and we decided, okay, let's focus over here in the mission critical areas. But the second thing that's happening, which I believe is equally a threat, is that about 9 months ago, we saw the arrival of DeepSeek. And so if you think about China and you think about our adversaries, one of the things that is growing every day, as we've seen, of course, is they're flooding social media ever since, the mid 2012, 2015. So they've created that. But then the second is they saw how quick the pickup was for a foundation model where you could chat with the data. And so they very quickly decided, here's another way to enter Western society. So DeepSeek, within 3 months, over 100 million downloads of DeepSeek. And what happens with that is that, at first it looks, wow, this looks like an innovation. This looks really like something that, is advanced, but everybody forgets everything that China has produced has had a trap door. And that trap door has always been about supplying data back to, the nation, for them to build continuously, try to outmaneuver the West. And so No different with DeepSeek. Well, not only did DeepSeek get downloaded by 100 million, but it also then gets, propagated through applications that people built on top of it. So it's out there, it's spreading, and it's got, the kinds of probably trapdoors that one's going to see at some point in time when those trapdoors get activated. But right after that, a second thing happened. More companies in China produced foundation models, and pretty soon, as reported by the Wall Street Journal, I think they counted 1,500 models were produced, all from different companies, all cutting across different industries, all being pushed into the open source world. And of course, people are going to look at them and they're going to say, oh, there's nothing wrong with these, and they're going to go build applications. So we saw that as a massive threat. And what we have done is we've gone to the President's Intelligence Committee run by Devin Nunes, and we proposed back in April that there should be a vetting center should be built where you quantitatively test these foundation models before they're allowed to be deployed. And those tests will help us understand things like, what is the provenance of this information? What is the lineage, and what's the intent? And because in the course of building our own models, we have all those tools. So now we said, what if we were to provide all those tools to the nation and allow them to build a center that would verify all of these models? Because they're a bigger threat, even though we're being threatened by, models built in America. There's an existential threat that comes from outside of that. So long story short, we went to the Secretary of the Army, Dan Driscoll, who kind of approved kind of the next step of that. And we're hoping that the first stage of this program get put in place, but it's a level that says these models contain a yellow flag, a red flag, a green flag, and you should know what's contained in here. And so I think we determined that's probably the best way that we can approach this, because the scale of it is so substantial.
Tony, you know what impresses me about you? How long ago did you invest in Seekr?
Was it 3 years ago? 2 years ago? 3 years ago?
That probably probably 4.
4 years ago, yeah.
Yeah.
So how did you know 4 years ago AI wasn't even like part of anyone's thought process? Like how did you know to invest in this company that was going to be so important going forward?
Well, you bet on the people and you bet on the track record of what they'd already done. But the problem I already saw on social media, right? And news, that's what grabbed me to start with. Is like, I wanted to be able, I'm an independent. So I voted on both sides of the aisle. I don't believe in these extremes that people have. And things were getting worse in this area. And also I was concerned during the COVID time because there's such obvious, limitations of what's being put out. The truth was being squashed by some of the most advanced doctors and, scientists in the world. So all those things were starting to just make me crazy. And I was looking for an answer. And then I saw this and I saw like, hey, I could look at a piece of news and know, okay, how many things here are actually verified quotes versus, unverified quotes? Somebody saying, some source told them. I wanted to know, was it leaning, independent? Was it leaning right or left, and how far? And I could look at any news story in a few seconds and have that. Because I wanted to read something from the left and for the right, but something that had credibility, not something that was a giant promotional perspective. And I think that's how you make more intelligent decisions. So that's what hooked me initially. And then Pat and their team, I mean, just, the more homework you do on them, the more impressed you'll be by what they've already done. Well, at this stage, it's pretty obvious what they've done. It's a whole different level.
Yeah, great. Thanks. Pat, do you mind going into Seekr a bit more?
Sure.
Giving people like
let me share my screen here. So there's really a couple things that to take from this slide. First is that there's an enormous amount of effort around the world to implement AI. People see it as everything from, a challenge for their society to create new jobs and new economics, all the way up to, national defense and intelligence. So this is not just the province of fund managers and private equity firms and venture capitalists. This is the province of nations now. Nations are creating sovereign funds. These are small numbers compared to things that have actually been created, I think, we're probably going to be in the $1 trillion range, and the rest of the world is going to go in the same dimension. And part of it's been driven by, what the use cases are, but also part of it's been driven by the state of the world we're in. There's conflicts everywhere. And so because of these conflicts, there has to be defenses. And I think, we were talking at the beginning of the story about, the fact that the arrival of drones, the arrival of, low-cost satellites. I mean, the whole world is changing where, you need to spend money in technologies that can help you in multiple dimensions. But it's happening everywhere. It's not just the province of, the financial community. And as we've also said, the other big thing here that we look at is that there's a real cost of hallucinations. I mean, I think Tony said it absolutely beyond the numbers here. It could be destructive to, health and banking. It can be catastrophic to defense and intelligence. And in business alone, I mean, 47% of the people that have deployed it have had difficulties with, the predictability of these mistakes or the errors that occur, or even the chain of sort of custody of data is broken all along the way. And so at the end, nobody can explain how they got the result they got. So until these things are resolved, there will be hesitations, there will be limitations. And this is where we come on the scene, is we solve for these kinds of problems. And the biggest area that, we see right now, of course, everyone's focused on, what we would call, text language. So everyone's focused on a language model, but we're actually extending to look at, a visual foundation model where you can actually chat with objects, chat with images, chat with video. That doesn't exist today. It's in development, but it's going to be incredibly important because, less than 1% of the world is text. The rest of it is non-text. It's just incomprehensible sometimes, and there's no way to utilize that data. Imagine if you could utilize all that data. It's in the form of audio or image or video, or it's in different, radio waves. There's so much information, but how does one process it in real time to make the best decisions? And so Seekr has a product coming out, beta product at the end of this month, and then we'll go to final production, and it will become, we believe, critical in some of the national defense initiatives that are going on, like the Golden Dome. We are targeting somewhere between 50 and 100 million this year. That sounds like, why couldn't we get a finer grain? And that's because many of the deals that we're finalizing now have large numbers associated. What the revenue recognition will be, what the timing will be, we're still working through them, but we have, deals across both the commercial and the government space that are, substantial, $100 million type deals that we're pretty confident of. We really only started shipping a product in the fourth quarter of 24, so we don't really have an operating history to kind of project off of. We did 18 million in that fourth quarter, so we're pretty comfortable at the low end of the range and pretty optimistic at the high end of the range. We've chosen to only focus on the critical infrastructure markets, places where, without having the accuracy or without having the reliability, significant and costly problems occur. We find that's the best pickup for us. We have well over 90 engineers now. If you look at what's happening out there and you believe the news, I mean, some of the companies, Google, Meta, Microsoft, they're paying $20 million an engineer and higher. And so we're saying to ourselves, geez, even at the low end, the company's worth, over $1.5 billion just with the assembled workforce and the talent that we've got. Not that that's our plan, but that's a way to say, from a value perspective, we're building value by bringing on some of the best engineers in AI, from some of the big companies, some of the universities, and just innovators that we've found trying to put their own startup together, but maybe couldn't raise the capital they needed. And finally, we are building patents. Every day we have patents, not for offensive use, but more for defense. And we find that, the moat that we continue to build, we're probably higher than 32 today, are all around this idea of the quality of data and, the explainability of the AI, because it is accelerating. And this is an area that we're experts on, and sooner or later, I think the value of having this portfolio will become clear.
What do you mean by explainability of AI? Is it like, having the AI understand visual cues and what it's seeing visually?
Well, explainability means, how did I get a result, right? So what is the pathway? So imagine that you're getting a P&L for a Fortune 100 company, and you say, gee, where did the sales number come from? Well, you start to trace it back and you say, well, it came from 10 operating divisions. Okay, let's pick one of those divisions, and how did it get to 100 million in sales? And by the time you're done, you should be down to every single sales order, even if it was $1, right? That is explainability. And if you can't do that, if you can't get down to, well, that division said 100 million, but I can only get to 50, all of a sudden you have a problem. What's the problem? It could be internal controls, or it could be fraud, or it could be something else, right? So you have now uncovered, if it's not, the explainability means either you've uncovered that it's the truth, or you've uncovered that it isn't, and that's a bigger problem.
Right.
That's what and explainability has its, same characteristics in the chain of custody in law enforcement. Is that the real evidence, or is that evidence been tampered before I can prosecute somebody? And we all know if the evidence is tampered with, the case gets thrown out. So the quality of data matters. You're in an intelligence community, and it's like, I've identified an entity that I'm going to take action on. I had better make sure that I can verify that entity, because when I take action, if I'm wrong, there's a catastrophic result. So that's the kind of way we treat data, is we need to know the whole chain of custody. That's how we do it.
Great.
From an investment point of view, we're in the middle of a Series B. We've raised over 60 million of that 100. We've got strategics that are interested in coming in. We talked to the Force family a while back, and so we're still happy to present that there's some open capital here for people to invest. It's at 1.2 billion. Some people have said that's pretty low, but I'm a person that wants to give a good return for people, and I want to be sure about the money, and I wanted to also be selective about the money. So we've had several offers from, let's say, firms that wanted to come in, and we didn't want to take it because we built our firm based upon family offices, based upon high net worth individuals, ourselves putting money in. So I treat this like it's my money, and I want to make sure that the right person comes in, not somebody that's going to, corrupt, I think, just because they have a check, what we've already built. We have no debt, so we've done that really well. And now we're, some of the institutional money we're taking in, really we put to work. So two great people, AMD Ventures, which did all the diligence for us on the tech side and have introduced us to some tremendous opportunities, which we'll talk about, that are off the charts in scale because of what's happening out there as they build data centers and they around the world and start powering things as a worthwhile competitor and up and coming to NVIDIA. And also to Danu, which is a small group in Greenwich, but have highly competent people that are knowledgeable about the defense and intelligence business and knowledgeable about various aspects of, I would say, the kind of core technology we have. So that they did the diligence originally, and then from that point, we've sort of been building up from it. We have the final kind of last closing for us will be August 30th, and then we're also represented by Guggenheim Partners, who have been really good at showing us some of the big strategic firms that we're kind of in negotiations with right now. It's the first time we've ever offered it as a preferred, so everybody that comes in at this level, gets some protections, and we have it all in the data room. But it's a good plan. It's in a way it gives people at least a 3x return. Of course, we think it's going to be far more than that, but at least gives them a minimum kind of a return on investment. And we've had quite a bit of. In fact, of the 60 million, I would say, at least a third are current insiders that said, hey, this is a good deal. I'm going to put my money on that too. So it's been great to see our install base participate. Just some of the recent things that have happened. Lisa Su, CEO of AMD, put us up there as, driving innovation. So she specifically called us out. Oracle specifically called us out, and there'll be a large billboard, we've been told, built in the Oracle Stadium in San Francisco that will be put up as one of the innovators in building foundation model using their platform. We've got a whole host of things going in Europe with many of the telcos. I don't know if you saw recently, we're partnering with a company called Vion. They serve about 160 million people in kind of Central Europe and Asia, but they just took one of their operating units public called Kyivstar, the first Ukrainian company that's ever gone public on the NASDAQ. And it's a telecom company, but it resembles more like a Comcast. It's got telecom, it's got broadband, it's also got ride sharing, and very aggressive group. And they want to build a data center, $1 billion data center in the Carpathian Mountains to take over the infrastructure of the country when they believe it'll be resolved soon, the conflict. Let's hope it is. And they're now at a 3.6 billion live on NASDAQ. They'll be licensing Seekr Technology to kind of expand their whole vision. And then we've got one of the key programs within the Army called Linchpin, which is where all the situational awareness gets done. We've been chosen for that. And then we're up for quite a bit more. To the valuation, people often ask, like, well, how did you come up with this, or where do we kind of look at things? And over the last 12 months, we've done about 25 million in revenue. And where does that put us? And we put a few people up there that you may know, where similarly situated to us. They had valuations that were quite bigger. Now, some of them are based on different factors. Cohere is a Canadian company, but it also has a Nobel Prize winner on their board who invented some of the AI that that they're utilizing in Cohere. But if you look at their business after 5 years, we're almost on top of them. And so my point here is that there's a lot of upside just in where we are. Never mind any further capital raise, but we're tracking to other companies that had much higher valuations. So we see that as we execute our plan and close off some of the bigger deals in the last 4 months, that the opportunity for us to exceed these people is pretty real. As we indicated at the beginning, we have a tremendous team here. Search is really the essence of all of what we did, and how we were able to progress so quickly to AI. Because if you look at all of the big AI companies today, the common thread is they all have a search background, whether it's out of Microsoft with Bing and OpenAI, whether it's Gemini out of Google and AWS using Anthropic, all had search history, all were using search for 10 years, 15 years. So it's a progression that took us from natural language querying to machine learning to deep learning to AI. It just didn't happen overnight. This has been a progression. But if you look at all the leading companies in AI, they all have search backgrounds. As we have kind of talked about, there are multiple problems that we solve. We talked about the accuracy and the explainability, but the other thing that we didn't talk about is how we protect things like data sovereignty, where we can be put into a data center inside of a nation. So in any country, we can take our cluster of our servers and our platforms and put those within their sovereign sites so we can protect all the privacy and the information that they have. A lot of the big companies can't do that. They're all run out of central massive systems like, Meta and people like that. We can actually go and country by country. So we satisfy a lot of the different regulatory requirements that the big companies don't. We've already satisfied them. And then the other thing that's really interesting about us is we really believe that, to process information at scale and at speed, you need to be as close to the source as possible. So think about when we talk about an edge, many people talk about your smartphone as kind of an ultimate edge, but we take it a step further. We're actually, talking to people about putting Seekr on small GPUs that may fit on satellites. So as data is being emitted out of a satellite in real time, we're processing it, we're separating it out, and we're immediately providing, real-time results down through that downlink station, as opposed to sending gigantic amount of data down and then having humans assemble it. We're trying to change that paradigm very, very quickly. And some of these are already being tested in a variety of different, I would say, active locations. The model we talked about that is in development is an extension of SeekrFlow. It really takes the same thing that SeekrFlow does with all of its explainability, let's call it, its ability to build text-based products. Now it takes it to the next step. It takes vision-based information, computer vision-based information in. That means things like satellite images. That means things coming in from Earth orbiting stations, you name it. And the image here is meant to convey the complexity, because if you all look at an image, you're looking top down at an image. It's 2D. And so you're losing a tremendous amount of fidelity in 2D. Now look at the richness of 3D, and you can imagine all of the mathematics that are within that 3D, height, distance, depth, everything becomes available to you once you go from a 2D to a 3D. So again, that's a big innovation that we're working on here, and part of the reason that we have the whole AMD cluster of 1,000 GPUs running on a 24-hour, 7 days a week is to be able to produce a model like this. Critical infrastructures we talked about, but telecom services is really important. We also sell to the supply chain. We have some very big customers over there. Some of them have 1.5 trillion part numbers. And how does one, sift through all those? How does one, take a look at part numbers, suppliers, KYC, and then logistics challenges and put all those together? That's the province of AI. It can do these things, much quicker than a human can do them. And they're usually repetitive, but they're at a scale that's so gigantic and with minutia in them that it's tiresome and it takes weeks to do. We do it in days. And then in the government space, I think we've talked about, defense and intelligence-based applications, and, where the level of sophistication is growing, where, we've gone now from just being able to ask the computer a question, get an answer, to now having what we call agents who are sitting there almost on our shoulders and, anticipating, okay, Pat's asked a question about maybe what's the tax exemption for this particular thing. You may have multiple agents that fire off that say, oh, wait a minute, in 2024, we already took a deduction for that. Or, maybe we should go back and refile taxes because I've just looked at the tax code and guess what? We missed something. So these agents become emissaries of you. And as an emissary, they carry out your wishes, they carry out your intent, but they don't go away from that. So this is the next generation of what's coming, and we're kind of building a whole agentic workforce around that. But more importantly, if you take that to the next level, My agent's going to talk to your agent. Well, now how do I know you are who you say you are? How do I verify that you're not a scam, you're not a fraud, you're not trying to, take advantage of me? So another level of verification of information becomes critical. We have two big motions going in the company. We have a commercial activity, a new vice president of sales, all sorts of activity over there, 25, 30 active commercial accounts. Some of them are pretty substantial. They range from some of the biggest telecoms to oil and gas companies, transportation companies. We also, on the government side, have partnerships with a lot of the large contractors that exist. So General Dynamics, Booz Allen, Lockheed Martin, people that are established in that community, but also realize that there's a disintermediation occurring, in part started by the Trump administration that said, you can't be a consultant anymore. You need to produce a product. So it's opened the door for many companies that are product producers to go direct to the customer, which is the Army or the Navy. Witness the success of Palantir. They have successfully been able to go right to the source of the money, avoid having to go through middlemen. And that's essentially what we're doing as well. We're bidding directly on contracts, bidding directly to the customer. And yes, we'll take advantage of the contracts that are already in place, and we'll partner with people, but we also have something that no one else has. And now we're going, direct to the customer, who can now do transactions with us. No more waiting, 5 years to go through a competition. These things are happening in real time. And so part of the challenge for a company like Seekr is, do we have enough people that can actually write these proposals? And so one of the things we've done is we've actually, taken our own AI and used that to begin writing proposals. And so we're actually using our own products to not only sift through the 85,000 bids that are, or RFPs that are out there that the government's put out, and select those that are the best. We're actually using it to make the bids themselves. And so we're utilizing it in a way that actually kind of can exponentially increase our sales. These are just some of the customers we've got, but as you can see, they cut across banking and supply chain, cloud services. All of them are using our product in some way. Same thing on the government side. You see all the logos for all the different departments. The vision model is we expect to be a big driver of business for us toward the end of this year and certainly into next year. This is a little bit of an eye chart, but what it's trying to tell you is that the spread that we have here that I talked about at the very beginning, where we have signed customers that are worth currently somewhere around 31 million. We have projected sales from a dozen others that we're very confident of that could add another 30 million in sales. And then below, we've got some what I would call home runs that may come in, that if our contracts are completed in time, and when we can convince the finance people on the recognition of it, we could see upwards of potentially $40 million in that period. So the way that I assess the risk on this is, what's the worst case? Probably in the 50 to 60 range. And what's the best case? Probably a little bit over 100, which is why we priced our offering kind of where we did. That's one of the dimensions to it. And finally, what's the use of funds? So we set out to raise 100 million. As I said, we're near 60, somewhere 55 to 60. The primary use, though, really is to build models. And, we spend a good amount of money, over probably 20 million, maybe a little bit more this year, on building models. It's really essential that we have the compute power to do it, time to market, and just the size of the data. I give you an example. In one of the companies that we're dealing with, we asked for a set of data so that we could train our model. And, they asked us how big was it? And we said, look, we have 1,000 GPU cluster. And they said, it's too small. And we said, well, come on, like how big could this data be? And they said, well, if you were to use all the data that we have, it would be equivalent to 100 billion Netflix movies. So that just gives you an idea of the scale of data that we're looking at. So
Wow.
we've actually, with that partner, we've actually gone back to AMD to have discussions about how we can partner together, because the compute to be able to process that, is north of $100 million. But it has enabled us to get into a game with a customer where the net value could be several billion dollars over time. So, but that I think wraps up what I wanted to say, and turn it over to you.
Let's turn it over to Harvey. We have a couple, more than a couple of audience questions. Harvey, take it away.
Yeah, we'll just take a few here. Unfortunately, we're running out of time, so I apologize if we don't get to your question. Please feel free to email those to Callie, and she will forward those to Pat. But I've got a couple here that we'll start with. One is, does Seekr compete with Palantir, or does it sit on top of Palantir?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we are complementary to Palantir. So Palantir provides a framework and a great user interface, some AI, but our models would slot into Palantir, and Palantir would be able to take the output from those models and export them or utilize them in some other, let's call it investigative or problem solving way. But we would be very complementary to them, and in fact, in some of the proposals that we have, Palantir would be proposed with us.
Okay, great, thank you. What is your exit strategy?
So my plan is that we believe we're on the very front end of where the AI cycle is turning. I don't know if anybody read the recent report that came out, but whether it came from MIT, but it's been pushed around everywhere. About 95% of the people in corporate America or government are dissatisfied with big tech's rollout of AI because of the hallucinations. And so we think that we're at the very beginning of this cycle where we've got something incredible. So we're going to push this as hard as we can. We're going to build the company as fast as we can, but we're also going to be cognizant of the fact that, at some point, we either have to acquire companies to grow or be acquired, one of the others. So I think there's a very good chance that, let's call it within, 18 months to 24 months, something like that could happen. I personally have already spoken to 3 companies that could easily buy, Seekr at this point, but we don't feel it's the right time. And then there's another option, which I hadn't considered, a year ago. I would have said no, but several companies have come where a private equity company owns a complementary company to us and has talked about putting us and them together and taking it public. And I hadn't really thought about that option, but I can now see that, many of these private equity firms hold these companies that may have not caught the AI wave and can't catch it, but if they are, put with someone that has it, they can be reinvigorated, and they may be, a whole different kind of a business can be emerged. So there's a lot of opportunity across the board there.
Great. Well, I'm going to ask one last question. And again, I apologize for not being able to get to all of them. And if you would like your questions answered, please send an email to Callie and she will forward those on to the team at Seekr. Pat, is Seekr cloud agnostic? In other words, can a company add SeekrFlow to their existing cloud?
Absolutely. We run on, that's one of the things that we do advantageously. We're cloud agnostic. We can also run on premise machines. So you could take an 8-node, NVIDIA, 8-node AMD or an Intel, you could roll it into someone's site and you could run SeekRFlow there too. So we run from data center to edge, and we run on anyone's cloud. We also run on other clouds, so not the big four that you might think of, but clouds like a CoreWeave as an example, or somebody like Raven Wolf and people like that are all the neo cloud companies that are coming. So we run in those environments, and then we also run on chips that are not specifically GPUs. So think of ASICs and think of FPGAs, which are kind of trying to drive the price of inference down to pennies. We run there as well. So we're trying to be, meet the customer where their data is. We don't do it the other way around.
Great, thank you. Well, that's all the time we have for now. If you do have further questions or would like an introduction to the folks at Seekr, please send us an email and we will make that introduction. I would like now to turn it back over to Pat and Tony, if you're still there, for any final words for our audience, just as we're closing out. So Tony, you want to kick us off?
I just simply would say, look, when you're looking as an investor, all of you have your own criteria. But, I look to try to make investments that I think not only are at the front of a critical trend, and I don't think there's a more important one than AI, but I'm also looking for things that can contribute to society in a meaningful way. And again, I know I'm echoing what I said earlier, but this is really about making AI tell the truth. I think that is one of the single largest challenges we're going to face between, videos that you can't tell what's really true, content you can't. If we don't get a hold of this early on, we're going to have a real problem. In fact, that we have a solution right now that works and that's diversified in its application, I think is extraordinary. And again, that's why I'm so passionate, not just an investor, but a believer in the technology and its impact on society. So those are my 2 cents.
Yeah. No, I thank you, Tony, for being such a loyal investor and, friend through this whole thing, and made some great introductions for us, and appreciate that. But more importantly, to echo what Tony said, we got into this because we really believe that, if you can't believe in your country or your health system or, science, then you're standing on sifting sands. And when you're standing on those sifting sands, it's easy for some ideology or some other group to come in and convince you otherwise. And that becomes an erosion that's very difficult to control. And we've all seen it over history. It's happened so many times. And, we're at a point now where this electronic bombardment, where, people are on their phones 18 hours a day and they're looking at everything from videos to image to news reports. And, you just have to sit back and, a big defense is critical thinking. And a lot of people say, oh, what does that mean? But it really means, like, don't believe everything you see. Take a little bit of time to, to think about it. And, we're in the front lines on that. And of course, applying technology to different aspects of that, but it's really the same thing. It's just critical that this kind of technology become, and there are others trying to do this. So it's becoming something that I think everybody's realizing, that, you cannot put, garbage out there, because the impact of it is gigantic.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Pat, Tony, Stephen. Thank you, everyone, for joining.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Great job. I really appreciate it.
Thanks,
have a great day.
Thank you, guys.
All right, everyone, have a great day.